Three, two, one. Good morning, everyone. Surprise, surprise. Dennis Eversen here, and I'm with Wen Chen, and we're doing part two in science and the pursuit of truth. Looking at the two of us and our backgrounds, I guess you could see, even from that, right? Uh, we have different things we're sharing and different pursuits we're doing, but our paths crossed. It's been at least a year ago now, hasn't it? You did a show with Lynn Morris on his Changing Time show. And you had another friend with you, and you shared on a documentary. You were sharing and helping to give a voice to the voiceless. And that's what I saw with that. It was on human organ harvesting in China, and just really being that person to speak out for your people, right? Your nation. You love China, and when I was producing for that show behind the scenes, and when I heard your story, I just wanted to share it with others. The uh, Just your heart, and then as I learned how you were pursuing science and what brought you to the truth of what was happening, and a desire for other peoples to know that. It was just so cool to see just that honest pursuit of truth, and how you were just, those seeds were implanted along the way. I think about the first episode we did on this subject, the pursuit of truth, where you talked about your parents having those books. What a rare opportunity you had, that how many other people around you didn't, right? I mean, that's incredible. And then your ability to read those books, right? It wasn't Tom Sawyer and Huckleberry Finn. It wasn't the science fiction magazines that my dad had, which were fascinating to read, but not a lot of value. Well, no, some of the
I
science.
did read them though.
Yeah,
I did
yeah,
read
yeah.
them.
My dad would always tell me that when he started with science fiction, the spaceships, they didn't have computers; they still used the slide rule. Um, but just that pursuit, and we started doing a couple different talks together, kind of my Tuesday talk thing, and then really I see this the last show we did and this one as something different that has just kind of been brought together as we both been pursuing truth. We got to meet in person, a week ago or so over in Topeka. That was a lot of fun. You had a lot of support there. You want to give a little shout out to the people there and just kind of thank them. And I was really impressed. I went to the one evening on the Monday evening, and I thought, man, the support there, the research they were doing, the understanding, the ability to present it in a way that wasn't, over the top or crazy, or just giving it to the people in a way they could receive it. So yeah, go ahead and say hi.
So it's very fortunate to have this platform to share my personal story. And yes, I was very, very lucky to see Dennis last week in Topeka, Kansas. Actually, I was there for a week. I had like seven engagements, like including a media interview at Red Couch in one of the TV stations in Topeka. And also on Monday evening, that was where Dennis and I we went together to this state organs film documentary screening. You can find this film on most of the online platform, like including Amazon, called State Organs. That is a documentary about China's organ harvesting, forced
Yeah,
organ
and and
harvesting to
and
innocent
and one of the things I can do too, Lynn, when I'm not lazy, is I'll make a post of like these two shows, and I'll add the one we did with Mary, with that, and then a link to that information as well. So that way they can see it all in one post. So
Yeah, yeah. So my I mean, I make a living as a scientist. I have been working for Caltech, and I used to be a graduate student here. I've been in Caltech for 31 years, and originally I came from China. And as just a recap from the previous episode one about my experience in China, right? I grew up in a family of intellectuals, and my parents both survived the Great Cultural Revolution in China between 1966 and 1976, when over 2 million intellectuals were killed because the Chinese government did not like intellectuals. They thought that people got education can criticize the government. But my parents survived, but they were heavily, heavily traumatized. They had a mixed feeling about education, right? They kept telling me, you need to learn something, you find a job, but don't be a top kid. But unfortunately, I was a top kid, and I mean, there was nothing I can do about it. I was just born with a talent on math and science, and eventually, I won a prize at a national competition that broke the arrangement of my parents. Right, like once I won that national competition, I mean, I was kind of like automatically enrolled in a top university, and then eventually came to the U.S. And that was what I mostly spoke about um, in the previous episode.
Yes. Mhm.
But in this episode, I really want to talk more about my experience in the United States
Yes.
as a scientist, right? I came as a PhD student, and at a place like a Caltech, I met many, many top scientists.
Mhm.
I mean, I have like had like private conversations with at least
And
10
and
Nobel
and and
laureates.
and for like the context of some Americans for us, it'd be like meeting a rock star, right? Like you
Yeah,
really, yeah,
yeah.
yeah,
Not only live with them, but also like I spend a lot of time with them, right? Like for my research, and just every day you see them on campus, and some of them were my mentors, and I learned a lot from these scientific giants. And I truly admire those scientists, especially like those early ages, right? Like, I remember I talked to one of the Nobel laureates in the 90s, and he was I just saw spiritual paths
yeah,
that they're taking. Like, they came to science because they were pursuing truth.
yeah,
And I always saw, like, as a scientist, you should pursue truth, and otherwise, why are you on this path, right? Like, it is just
yeah,
like you want
yeah.
to learn how the universe work, right?
Yeah, it
And
doesn't
you
really
want to
make
use your
sense
ability.
if you're going to follow science, it really doesn't make sense not to want to be objective, really, right? And look at the facts and, the math, and because you can verify. That's the beauty of it, right?
Yeah,
Verification.
yeah. And actually, if you think about history, scientific history, like many and many top scientists, including Einstein, they were also spiritual. You
Mm,
know, they eventually end up like their path ended up in the religion, in the spiritual path. So I don't see a conflict between science and the religion. Like
mm,
this is our career, and our spiritual path at the same time, like can guide us to have a
Well,
successful career
well,
and have discovery.
and certainly for you, uh, y- you pursued science as a spiritual path, right? I mean, it wasn't just like you're seeing a pursuit of truth as a spiritual journey, right?
Yeah, that was
Yeah,
how I came into this field, right?
yeah,
But I mean, I would just say like after quite a few years in this field, I think my view towards science changed, like especially after the pandemic, right? Like I see many, many problems in science, and I see the problem like, because the scientific research itself nowadays have no spiritual guidance.
mm,
And like I don't see that it can this path as a scientist, I don't see that it can elevate me as
mm.
in the spiritual practice. I mean, you need something else, like
Yeah,
not science, but it's
yeah,
my career.
yeah,
But I really want to focus this episode on the COVID, on the
yeah,
pandemic,
yeah,
because that was really a life-changing experience to me and probably to everyone else in
yeah.
this world. um
Well,
s-
even now, there's things that are so much different than then because this show itself, you've already mentioned COVID. There was a time when we would have pretty much been shut down and almost were completely because we would have like a doctor on that was talking about evidence and his personal story, and they'd be like, nope, that doesn't align with what we want. So even that media side of it, and of course you're going to talk about that science side and what you saw there, but man, what a different time we're in already, just from that.
Yeah, and I also want to mention today is a very special date in the history of COVID because 6 years ago today, April 15th, 2020,
Mm,
the Chinese government had issued a regulation or a
mm,
law that nobody can publish articles about origin of coronavirus
oh,
before approval by the Chinese government. So basically, there's a censorship. No one can research where the COVID virus came from, right?
and this
And
isn't
that
just a
made it,
small area, right? This is a censorship of like everyone, right? This is like,
yeah, the
yeah.
Chinese government did not allow any Chinese researchers. Literally, they do not allow any Chinese researchers to study where the COVID virus came from. And that's suspicious, right? Like, just think about such a law, right? Why would they do that? And
Hmm,
the fact is that
hmm,
nobody can enter the Wuhan lab to study the
hmm,
coronavirus. Then they literally like you shut down the whole possibility
hmm.
of tracing down where the virus came from, right?
Yeah.
So,
And
so Dennis, tell
I
me,
remember, yeah. Oh, go ahead.
tell me about your experience about the coronavirus, right? When the news first came, right? What did you
Mhm.
think about the coronavirus, the COVID? I remember it was
Uh,
like January 2020.
yes. Well, the biggest event that happened was them starting to shut things down with travel. My daughter was in Spain, celebrating her upcoming birthday, and her friends is missionary in Spain, and she went to visit her. So when she got there, they shut down travel. And dealing with the airlines and trying to get her home wouldn't have happened. It was really a miracle of the Lord. My wife and my neighbor, that was a missionary to Africa for years, went to the airport, talked to a person there, and told them my daughter was only 17. And so they were able to, otherwise, they were like, okay, $5,000, we can, maybe do something here, 2,000 there. And anytime I tried to get information, I could not get accurate information, up to date information. Any information I could find would be outdated or wrong or just irrelevant. It was very hard to find any clear information on anything, really. And that
Mm.
was more my focus at that time.
And that is exactly what the censorship brought, right? Like, because when the outbreak happened in Wuhan, China, right, we're supposed to be, we expect them to be transparent. We
Mhm.
expect them to tell us everything about what's happening. It's 2020, internet, everything, right? Like social media, you're supposed to know a lot, but we didn't.
And kind
And
of a bedrock of science is documentation, right? Because you got to be able to repeat it and everything. You got to know what you're doing. You got to follow the steps. So, and
yeah, well,
sharing that. Right?
yeah, I did publish two blog articles about one is was about the censorship in China, how they block the information. The other was about origin of the coronavirus. But I really want to tell you my experience at that time. I remember it was January 2020, right, the beginning of January, and on Chinese national TV, they showed like several doctors apologizing on Chinese national TV on spreading rumor. And what was the rumor? The rumor was that they said the coronavirus can transmit from human to human. So at the beginning they said like, okay, this virus came from wild animals and they were
Yeah.
not transmitted between human. No worries, like everyone can still travel to Wuhan, and everyone from Wuhan can go all over the world. So before um, the Chinese government shut down Wuhan, right? On January 23rd, already 5 million people left Wuhan and traveled
Mm,
all over the world and spread the virus. First they took it to Italy, then that took
yeah.
went from Italy to New York, and then went from New York all the way from the West Coast. It did not come from California because Trump shut down the travel between China and the US first, but he did not expect it would go to New York, and then
Mm,
from go to like Europe, and then go from the East Coast to the US. But anyways, let's go back to the origin, right? Like the January 2020, when I saw the news about Chinese doctors apologizing on Chinese TV, said that virus is
mm.
not contagious. Like I found something wrong, right? Okay, whenever you have Chinese government having something like this, it's not rumor. It's not rumor. This is
Yeah.
typical
So
in China, right?
and this is based on past experience, right? I mean, you know, that yeah. Pretty much, if they're saying it's a rumor and they're making an official announcement, that you need to
Then
look a little closer.
yeah, those who know the Chinese government, that okay, the reality is the opposite. And
Yeah.
I'm at Caltech, and right soon after that, like we saw the sequence of the coronavirus. Actually, as a matter of fact, seeing the sequence of the coronavirus, the scientists in China paid a huge price for that. So
Mm,
at least the 4 labs in China independently sequenced, isolated, and sequenced the virus.
mm,
And one of the labs um, in Shanghai submitted this sequence to GenBank. That's an international website to like they store the sequence of everything, everything, everything. And then immediately we were able to see the sequence. And but once you see the sequence, you see something suspicious
mm,
because in the sequence there's a part that do not allow to any do not like exist in any other coronavirus. And that part of sequence we call it furin cleavage site. So, like a coronavirus, they are very species specific. Chicken have coronavirus all the time, right? But
mhm,
they would not infect human. You can play
mm,
with the chicks and hens, they will not infect you because their virus cannot recognize human cell. They
mhm,
cannot launch themselves on human cell. They can launch on chicken cell because chicken cell on the surface, right? They have this receptor. It's a kind of
mm.
protein that the
Yeah.
virus can bind
Y-
to.
y-
Once they bind into that protein, they can get themselves into the cell,
You,
but they
you can you
cannot
can you
get
can
into
almost
human.
think of like oh, I don't know, like a puzzle piece or some kind of blocks that fit together. There's certain ones that a Velcro style or something, for people to
Mhm.
kind of visualize. And so
Yeah,
certain things
yeah,
will lock together, certain things just don't. It's just they're not
yeah,
compatible.
yeah. Yeah. See, that's why like we rarely have disease caused by coronavirus,
Mm,
because usually they do not launch on human cell. But this COVID-19 virus, they have a very special part that allow it to touch the human cell and get onto
mm,
into human cell. And that kind of sequence do not exist in nature, do
mm,
not exist in like any other coronavirus. And that is also the kind of sequence that scientists in China usually use to genetically modify their virus
mm,
to make them able to infect other species. And that is what made it suspicious, right? Because the Wuhan lab have a long history of making gain of function uh, virus. When we call it gain of function, that means like, for example, SARS virus or some other virus, right? Like they can affect this species and they cannot affect other species, but then you can genetically modify the sequence of this virus and make it able to affect a new species.
mm.
And we
So
call it
this
gain
is
of
where we
function.
heard of things like bird flus or what there was a swine one where they're like uh, going from one species to another, that type of thing.
Yeah, but sometimes like through mutation, right? But that's very, very rare.
Mhm,
But if you can modify the virus because you already know there are viruses that can affect a human, and you
Mhm.
can take that kind of chunk of sequence out and move it to a virus that cannot affect
Mhm.
human, then you can make it immediately able to
Mhm.
infect human. Like, if you expect nature to do it, it may take millions of years, but you can
Mhm.
do it immediately in a lab.
Yeah.
And it's illegal. It's illegal in the US and Europe to do this kind of experiment
Mhm.
because you are making virus, you are making biological weapon by doing so, right?
Yeah.
But it is legal to do that in China. And the Wuhan lab has been collaborating with one of the labs in University of North Carolina to do
Mhm.
this. So the American scientists teach them how to do that, and they
Right.
do that in Wuhan.
We don't do it
So they were
here.
able.
We
We
don't
don't
do
do
it
it here,
here. No,
yeah,
no,
but they can do
no.
it in China.
Right.
That is also why people think like why the Chinese government allow that to happen, right? First of all, it is you can use biological weapons, make biological weapons using this approach. That's a
Mhm.
typical way to make biological weapon. And the Chinese government have a long history of like promoting, at least on media, they say, oh, we
Yeah.
have biological weapon, we have chemical weapon, we're not afraid of any enemies. That was the propaganda I learned as a child. Right,
Mhm.
and most Chinese like felt proud of it. Like, hey, we can
Yeah.
defeat any country
Right.
because we have weapons they don't have.
You can
Right?
attack us, but you'll die.
Yeah, yeah. This is like, what the Chinese government has been bragging about. So it's not surprising that they allow the Wuhan lab to do that. And at the same time, you have to know that in China, there's nothing's private. Everything's owned by the government. Like,
Right.
if any research, any company, like
Yeah.
anything you do,
Even
uh,
the people,
are
really,
accessible.
the people are owned by
And the
the
people,
yeah, I mean, that's part of the other
they're owned by the
talks we've
government.
had, yeah.
Yeah. So actually, right after the pandemic, right after the outbreak, the Wuhan lab was immediately taken over by the Chinese military, and nobody can enter the lab.
Yeah.
Um, but like I was at Caltech, when I am in Caltech, and I remember in January 2020, after the sequence was released, right, several Caltech scientists, the top ones, like we're talking about Nobel laureates, David Baltimore, the Caltech former Caltech president, and they look at the sequence. They all say like, okay, this is smoking gun. Just from the sequence, you can tell, okay, it's
It's
probably from
not
the lab.
it's not something that's hidden. I mean, it's so it'd be like
It's quite obvious.
it'd be like if you had a cloth and there was this patch that's on it that doesn't fit in the cloth, or it's a computer program with an extra little code in there that doesn't fit the other code. It's almost a different color or something like that. I
Yeah,
mean, it
yeah,
wasn't something that was hard to see. Is that correct?
yeah. That was pretty obvious. And I remember in January 2020, right, after we know the sequence, and most scientists expect like, okay, this is from the lab. There was probably a leak, and I just expected the Chinese government would like say, okay, the scientists made a mistake. It was all their fault. Let's punish the scientists.
Yep.
But that was not the case. What happened afterwards truly shocked me. Like, I saw the Chinese government just deny that the virus came from the lab. And I saw American scientists, the mainstream, right, also denied that the virus came from lab. And that was the most shocking experience as a scientist to me.
Yeah.
I said, like,
It,
how could they
it,
openly lie about the facts?
That's kind of life changing, isn't it? To
Yeah,
see, especially the field where, and the foundation you had with those giants in science, and just it really didn't fit, right?
yeah. And I even see people attacking David Baltimore, like the
Mm,
Caltech former president, right? The Nobel laureate
yep,
immunologist. And like people like him were attacked
yeah,
online because
yeah,
he spoke the truth. I mean, who else dare to speak the truth, right?
right.
Someone like him would be attacked. Like, but I understand he didn't care because, he probably didn't have like stocks about all these pharmaceutical companies making virus. He was not worried about it. I mean, he's already established and he had the guts to speak out. But I would say the rest of the scientific community, right? They either remain silent or they just became political. They just say, "Oh, the virus did not came from the lab. It's impossible to come from the lab." They just totally
Yeah.
ignored the sequence part.
And,
And
and
if
this
they
is and
ignore the
this
sequence,
is this is where we start to see where that foundation's so important, right? Right?
yeah,
Because you have that foundation of truth and really, and this isn't right. And you're starting to see there's people that have a whole different foundation, right? Or influence, maybe is a better term, in that it's financial. I mean, there's livelihoods that would be destroyed, right? Easily.
hmm,
Because so much the scientific research, it's funded, right? And you control fundings, all these different things,
yeah,
and you get blacklisted in certain fields, you're blacklisted, you're not. And so you're seeing this other foundation influence that's really infiltrated the field where it shouldn't be, right?
yeah. And I didn't know the field was so infiltrated until, February 2020. I mean,
Mm,
when I saw the reaction from the mainstream scientific community, it was heartbreaking. It was heartbreaking. You see, like the top scientists, they lied.
yeah.
They lied. Anthony Fauci said, like, those modification virus is not gain of function. Okay, my background is genetics. If you can make a virus able to infect a new species, if that's not called gain of function, I don't know what else is called gain of function, right? They're just
Maybe
fooling
it
the
lost
general.
another function it couldn't do. I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, I think these guys they're just like fooling the general public.
Yeah,
Use their fame as
yeah,
a top scientist. They claim themselves as a top scientist, but I don't know
yeah.
who gave them the title as a top scientist,
Well,
right?
I do remember that specific individual once saying that he was science, I believe. And yeah,
Yeah,
you have to agree with him.
yeah.
Wow, that's not how
As if
science
he was
works.
God, right?
Yeah,
Was not in this field, right? Like, a true scientist would not believe in the hierarchy, right? If you see the truth, you see the truth.
yeah.
No matter how famous you are or how insignificant you are,
Mhm.
you see the truth, it's a truth. You see the fact, it's a
Mm.
fact.
And if you're the
And
first
just
one, you
like,
can name it. You can put your name on
yeah,
it if you're the first
yeah,
name.
yeah, like, that's supposed to be the case. I remember David Baltimore. I mean, he never gave up his opinion about, where the virus came from, and he was
Mm.
also honest about it. He said, like, if there's a leak, we need to find out why there was a leak, and we should prevent a leak from happening again, right?
Let's not
And
let
these
this
are all,
happen again. Yeah.
yeah, these are all very, like, I would say, like, all very fundamental common sense, right?
Mm,
If you think about it, like, shouldn't this be the case all the time? But if you see the reaction of
mm,
the the mainstream scientists, I was so shocked, and it has been quite a few years, and really, like, I think it has not changed much. I
mm,
mean, I had a conversation over the dinner table last week when I was in Topeka, like, when one of the ladies talked to me about the virus and everything, how it came from the
mm.
the wet market.
Oh yeah.
I said, I mean, I was so surprised. You said, I told her that, Chinese people do not eat bats, right? We don't eat bats. That's not part of our cuisine.
Yeah.
And the Wuhan wet lab does have quite a few wild animals, but they do not sell bats because Wuhan is in central China and the
Yeah.
weather do not is not good for bats. Like, bats are in Southeast Asia, like Yunnan province, like
Mm,
2,000 miles from Wuhan. Yes, those places have bats, but
mm.
Wuhan does not have
Yeah,
bat.
basically the bats that are there are the ones that are at the research facility there, and they have to
Yeah, I
bring them
mean, the
there.
Wuhan
So
lab,
yeah,
the Wuhan lab is the only place with bats.
they're not serving a dual purpose. They don't do the experiments and then sell them in the market for people to eat. So yeah,
Well, it's just not part of our cuisine. It's not part of the Chinese typical Chinese cuisine. Yeah, yeah. In Southeast Asia and in certain very rural area close to Southeast Asia, there are some minority groups that
It,
may eat things like that, but
and
not
if you're in a
Wuhan.
place where there's an abundance of them, I could see that
Yeah,
happening. I mean, because
but
there's an
see, it's been
abundance of them,
six.
so they're easy to catch and eat. So,
Yeah, it's been 6 years, right? She still that came from the the wet
wow.
market. I mean,
I
it's
didn't
been
even
such
know
a
that.
long time, and
I
America.
didn't know anybody still believed that. That's incredible.
Yeah, yeah. Like, but if all the information you get are from mainstream media, they just don't talk about it, right?
Oh,
And they don't talk about
yeah.
it. And then that's the
The
last
other
thing I
area,
know
yeah,
about.
that's the other place where it affected, right, was media,
Yeah,
that information thing, like I mentioned. So not only did that whole thing, and you really think about news, right, and reporting news. To me, that should be very objective. Really, almost in a sense, a pursuit of truth. You just present the facts. You don't shade it in a certain way or present the facts as a in a certain way. You don't say it was just say it was an unarmed teenager. You might want to mention it was a 6'4", 250-pound weightlifting teenager that that could smash a brick wall and was high on meth, or whatever. Leaving out information and selecting what you share, and boy,
yeah.
what a mess at that time. And
What a mess. If you
yeah.
think about like people, like how Americans perceive information about the
Mm,
coronavirus, right? The last thing you know about it was it's from the wet lab. And you cannot hear anything about how it associated with the lab. If any media say, oh, it may come from the lab, then they say, oh, you are like a, conspiracy
yeah.
theory, right? Like you become demonized.
Yeah.
I this is incredible to think about. Even the scientific field got so
Mm,
corrupted. And I know why. I really know why. Because if you think about how media have business ties with China, right? That, not only mainstream media, they get money to run advertisement for the Chinese government. That
yeah.
also includes scientific journals.
Hmm.
Because for any research you want to publish, if your research you want to let the world know, you need to publish it. Then it's
Yeah.
official. But
Well,
to be published,
there's something interesting in the science field. In many ways, it's not a field that's generating income, right? So it very much depends on support, financial support of some
yeah.
kind. Because now their research may
Yeah.
generate it, but the actual research really doesn't. It's more of a cost than anything. So very much more so than a lot of areas dependent on that funding
Yeah.
of some kind.
So see, like there are two major facts here. First is like you need to get the funding. So if the funding agency uh do not favor your speech, right? If the person controlling the fund, although it's American taxpayers' money, but there's people
Mhm.
controlling how to distribute the money. If you offend that person, you are not going to get funding. And if that person wants you to lie, you have to lie. And then if you want to publish your research, right, that journal may want to sell the subscription in China. They don't want to
Mhm.
publish your research, right? If many, many journals want to sell their subscription in China, make money in China because China is a big nation, right? The
Yeah.
Chinese government say you cannot publish any article about the Cultural Revolution. You cannot publish any article about the origin of coronavirus, or you can only
Mhm.
publish the Chinese government version, right?
Mhm.
And they want you to lie, then you will have to lie. See, this is where science lost its truth, right? You have to, if the funding agency wants you to lie, you have to lie because you need money.
Yeah.
If the journal wants you to lie, you have to lie because otherwise you can't publish your article. And this is how serious it is. And as a matter of fact, quite a few scientific journals also have the Chinese money, like they bought the journal. It's still the
Mhm.
same name, but the
Sure.
ownership is in China.
Mhm.
So see, you think it's the same journal, but it's
Mhm.
belong to the Chinese government. So here is a trick, like how the Chinese government can control the narratives, right? They
Mhm.
bribe the scientists, mainstream scientists, um, to like enforce their censorship in the U.S. They control the scientific journals to enforce the censorship. on the China
And
American
that's a
scientists.
lot of power, because the scientist is so much at mercy of the funding. And the I think people have to realize something like this, it wouldn't just affect a current funding they're having, but the possibility of getting future funding, because that's how far reaching that influence is. I mean, it's basically overshadowing the whole field.
Yeah. Yeah. So this means like, if you offend someone, not only like you're not going to get your funding now, in the future, you are never going to get funding.
Mhm.
And then at the same time, as a scientist, right, if you lose funding, that means you have to find another career
Yeah,
and you permanently leave the field.
yeah,
So this is what I saw after the pandemic. And as a matter of fact, like quite a few courageous scientists in the US, they have been researching the origin of coronavirus, right? Like, although we cannot enter the Wuhan lab, there are
right,
something you can do, like, once you can access the virus. And one of the research was done by a professor in MIT. I think his name was Alina Chan. And so she studied like this virus, which animal has the strongest affiliation with that. Like you say, people always say, oh, this virus came from animal. So which animal it came from? It has been
right,
6 years. You still have not found which animal it came from. That itself is already suspicious. So
right.
this scientist, she just did a research. She tried like over 100 kinds of animals. She tried their cells. She used coronavirus, COVID virus to infect these cells. And none of them work very well. Like it seems like the virus is targeted for human. And
Mm-hmm.
like this is the human is the host of this natural host of this virus. That means like that
Mm,
virus is only for human, right? But it's
wow.
only for human that became suspicious, right? Okay, obviously, if it's only for human, how come we have not discovered it for like thousands of years, never
Yeah,
appeared, right? And no
yeah,
trace, all of a sudden pop out. And if you say it's from animals, you got to find out where it came from. If it's from monkey, then that means it's easier to infect a monkey than
yeah,
infecting human.
right. Yeah, there'll
Right?
still
To
still
say
be
it came
some,
from monkey,
yeah, still be some of that
some kind of,
connection ability that's still there. Yeah.
yeah. So obviously, like from every perspective, like she's researcher, this is a human virus. Like it's not from animals; it's a human virus. And
And
there
to
are
be
also like
clear, there wasn't on record, hasn't been on record, coronavirus that affected humans. There's lots of other animals, chickens you mentioned, and other ones
yeah, they
that,
have coronavirus, but
yeah,
they don't
yeah,
affect
because
human.
it's not an
So
uncommon virus, right? It's fairly common.
it's common. It's just no human version.
Yeah, yeah.
So and also they have this like a furin cleavage site, that sequence
Mm,
that's foreign in this.
yes.
That made it already quite obvious. Although like mainstream scientists do not want to touch
Is
this
is
topic.
that sequence itself recognizable? Like, is it if that sequence was in a different virus, would it be the same sequence, or is it different sequences used?
That is that is specific sequence that scientists usually use to modify virus to infect human cells in labs.
And that was
It used to be,
real commonly used
it,
in China for the
yeah,
that. Yeah.
yeah. And it used to be allowed in the US at the beginning, but it was banned in
Sure.
2013.
Yeah, yeah.
So, but see, like
It's
we're
not good to
familiar with
play
that
with.
sequence.
Yeah, just yeah.
Yeah,
Let's not play with
yeah.
that stuff.
We know that a sequence it's a it's a well recognized sequence. Like you can see it immediately if you look at the COVID
Yeah,
19
and
virus,
just
and
because
there
we
are
can
also
do something doesn't mean we should do something.
exactly. We're not allowed to it because we decided like it's going to bring in more harm to human than the benefit, right? Like, but the people in China do that. Like, the Chinese government do that. And also it's a saying, like actually the Wuhan lab is continuing making the gain of function virus now. They're still doing so. And what they said is like, why do you want to do that, right? Reporters ask them, they say, oh, we need to develop vaccines ahead of time.
Yeah, oh yeah.
And think about it. Okay, think about it. If you develop vaccines ahead of time, you would want the virus to cause a pandemic. Otherwise, you lose money, right?
Yeah. Yep.
right?
Yeah,
See, this is a
it's a moneymaker. Yeah. Oh,
it's a shock.
and that's what we saw, a little further down the road from where we are in the story, but with the vaccines that came out and some of the mess that was done with it.
Yeah.
Just, yeah,
Yeah. We have to admit, like vaccines are great. In a lot of times, like polio vaccines, they work very well, right?
yeah,
But not coronavirus. Not coronavirus. Polio works well because polio is a DNA virus.
yeah,
DNA virus never changes. It's always like it's been like thousands of years. It's the same virus. So once you have the vaccine, you are like
yeah,
99% protected. But flu virus is RNA virus. Coronavirus, is RNA virus. RNA virus, they mutate all the time, like a flu
mhm.
shot. You need to get a different flu shot every year.
And
And even after you get it,
half the time they get the wrong one, and it doesn't work that good anyway. Depending,
yeah, even
because
if it's a good one,
they have to
yeah,
guess ahead of time because of that changing
yeah,
factor to produce it,
yeah,
mass produce it, to have it for the public.
yeah,
And by the time they get it out, if they don't quite guess it right, it
yeah.
may not be effective.
Yeah, even if you get the right shot, it's not 100% guaranteed. It's like
Yeah,
maybe like a 30% or like a 50% protection, like it make it less likely for you to get flu. But you get other risks, right? Like
yeah,
certain people um cannot get vaccines, like those who receive organ transplants, right?
sure.
Those organ transplant receivers, you have to take medicine to suppress your immune system.
Mhm.
If you get vaccine, then you can kill yourself because
Yeah,
once your immune system is boosted, you
yeah.
start attack
You're
your
like
transplanted organ.
two opposite things happening. Yeah,
Yeah, yeah, then you die. So there are quite a few people who cannot get vaccine. So it's just like this is just a reality we're facing. Not everyone can receive vaccine, and you cannot ask other people to die to protect you, right? You can only receive vaccine by yourself. You
mhm,
can't force other people to receive vaccine just
yeah,
because they cannot or
yeah.
not willing to take the risk.
And I think you and I are alike in this. We definitely believe in freedom of choice, right? People should be able to decide,
Uh,
especially in their health, their life, all of that. So
Yeah, yeah. Because every individual is different. You don't know other people's health,
oh,
right? And they don't
especially
have to tell you their
chemistry,
health.
biology. I mean, so much different, right?
Yeah.
There's substances that I could take that maybe could kill me or are fine. It would be the opposite for
Mhm.
you. Just yeah.
Yeah,
So
yeah. Definitely. Like everyone's, and also genetics, right? There are
yeah.
people who can smoke and drink and they live to
Yeah.
99 years old. Other
101,
people,
they're,
they smoke, drink, they
hey, come on
die.
to my party.
Yeah. And there are people die, die at
Yeah,
a young age because they smoke and drink,
yeah,
right? So really, you cannot force other people um, to do something to protect you. That's not right. And also most of the medicine, like almost all vaccines we see in the market went through like a clinical trial. We're talking about 10 years. You have to test it on animal, you have to testing on human.
mhm,
It takes many, many years. Like that's why we have FDA, we have clinical trial. That's why it takes so much effort for any new drug to
yeah.
be
And
available on market,
you
right?
definitely want to do those blind studies and all that.
Yeah.
You want
Yeah. Like
hard
if you
data,
remember
hard data. Yeah,
hard data. Yeah,
yeah.
remember like there was this thalidomide scandal in the 60s, I remember, 60s or 50s. Like,
Oh yeah.
it was in Europe, right? They developed this medicine for pregnant women, so that they would not vomit as much, feel better. But then like it was only in Europe, but some
Mhm.
American like Hollywood
Oh
celebrities,
yeah.
they were wealthy. They bought this medicine from Europe and gave them to their wives, like and the result was that medicine never went through human study, and eventually the babies they gave birth to had no arms.
Oh,
No arms. That was terrible. Just think about it. The pregnant women, they took this medicine so that
yeah.
they feel more comfortable that the babies had
Yeah.
no arms.
Yeah,
That was horrible.
I've got the money. I can do what's best for my wife, for my baby. This is going to be really good. Yeah.
Yeah. So that is why, because it would never went through extensive clinical trial, right?
Mm,
You see, like there are certain medicine you don't know what they are going to do in several years. Like you
mm,
don't know if you have not tested on human. Maybe
right,
like there's a chance this may save like 80% of people's life, but kill 55% of people's life.
right,
Okay, if you have that risk, you don't want to buy this medicine,
right,
on market. So all the vaccines, all the medicine we buy nowadays went through clinical trial, but
mm,
not the coronavirus vaccines. All these vaccines we received for COVID-19, they were like pushed out immediately. Like
mhm,
basically, you use human as guinea pigs to see whether they work, whether they don't
mhm,
work, and that's also a huge issue here. Like I can
yeah,
understand that people were desperate,
yeah,
especially when the first round of infection in Wuhan came out, right? And then in Italy and New York. And here is the biology about it, because when this kind of virus, RNA virus came, um, usually the first round was the most deadly. They kill
mm,
many people, but the
mhm,
most deadly strain also die with the patients.
mm,
And then those less deadly strain, right, survive, because if the patients do not die, the
uh,
virus can spread to more people. So that's almost like standard um, for all um, virus. Like if you think about the Spanish flu, right, after
yeah,
killed many people, it became weaker and weaker and weaker. Now it's just regular flu, right?
yeah.
I see like this COVID-19 virus followed the same path, right? It became weaker and weaker and weaker. Nowadays, like people don't really talk much about it.
Yeah.
But
Well,
imagine like people were,
the interesting thing with the vaccine and everything that happened with it, I think there was some positives in that for some of the more vulnerable and elderly that were saying, let's give it a shot. you know, that seemed to be where there was a place for that, but it became so much more than that, didn't it? It became this mandate in areas. You think of the military, and what really bothered me with some of that was here you got some of the healthiest people you can, these young trained military men and women that they're in their prime, and you're telling them to get this thing that we don't know. And
yeah,
maybe it seems to. I can understand if, there's a good chance you get COVID, you're going to die. You're older, breathing issues, all these different things. And you're saying, man, let me try this. But that's not how it played out. And then even with the whole mask thing and children and wow, this whole influence, this whole just kind of lies and uh,
yeah,
unclear understandings and false information. One of the issues I ran into when I ended up getting COVID was treatment, and even my daughter. So when she came back from Spain, I said she traveled. There's a possibility she could have this. Called my doctors. Let's go test and let's make sure. I thought that would be the proper thing to do. Let's verify right away as she got back, right, and see if we need to do anything. They were like, well, go home and wait. And, if she gets near death, let us know, basically, is what they told me.
oh
And I'm
my
like,
God,
what? 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 They were starting to get swamped with people. And they were basically telling people just go away and we'll wait and see what happens, kind of a thing. And the only good thing was because we had traveled and I made some contacts, the health department contacted me and they actually set up when I got back to Springfield. I drove right to the back of the hospital and I went in, and the guy in the full body suit came and did the test and everything. Then we went home to quarantine and wait for the test to find out. And I figured, I'll do what I can with this right here and then we'll find out. But the response from the medical community I got was shocking to me. And then later, when I got COVID, they're like, "Yeah, we don't. Yeah, there's some treatments, but yeah, we don't really do it. Just if
there
if
was
your
no treatment anyway.
if your oxygen monitor gets down to below, what if I pass out then? Then I contact you.
Yeah,
It's just
there was no treatment anyways.
yeah,
Literally, there was no drug to treat it.
Sure.
Like,
Yeah.
we call it a supportive care. That means you let your own body fight it.
Yeah.
And that's another thing that I found ridiculous is like Americans forgot that every person have an immune system, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
You would have died immediately without your immune system, right? Like
Yeah.
that's why like AIDS and all these immune deficient people die easily,
Right.
right? We all have immune systems. So like, it's natural for us to contact virus and bacteria in daily life and our own body fight it
Yeah.
off.
I
So,
remember in the past there was some studies in America where there was, uh, and I don't remember what generation it was, but the individuals that grew up in poorer families and communities were healthier as adults than the ones that were in the wealthier kind of middle class because they'd keep going to the doctor every time something happens, getting antibiotics, right? That's a big mess that we've done in America and stuff. And getting that and treating it and not and the people that didn't have the money, kids just went through the sickness and they built the immunity and they got stronger.
yeah.
So
That's also what my mom told me when I was young, right? Like when I was little. Like my mom kept telling me, like, okay, don't always go to hospital. If it's something minor, let your
yeah,
system fight it. Then you become more and more strong, right?
right,
And my dad was the opposite. Like
yeah.
my dad always went to hospital. But then like nowadays, my dad is ill all the time. And my
Yeah,
mom is always healthy. And
yeah,
she still worked around every day. Or she was almost 90. So I just feel like, yes, I totally agree with that. Our own system works better than
right.
any medicine. And of course, you need to go to hospital when your system cannot deal with it anymore. You need medical intervention. That is,
And
of
it's
course, right?
and the talk that they silenced was the idea of herd immunity.
Yeah,
And the doctors that would talk about, hey, let's see and try to protect again, the elderly, the ones that are more vulnerable, comorbidities, whatever, let's protect them. But for the most part, uh, we just need to live our lives, and it's gonna
yeah,
work it out,
yeah.
right? But they
I
were
mean,
shut
I can
down.
understand. Yeah. I think, I remember like at the beginning, like one of the Caltech students just asked like, why do we have to quarantine all the college students, right?
Yeah.
Shouldn't we quarantine all the old people? Because old people are more vulnerable, right? Why do
Right.
you want to quarantine all these
Yeah.
Caltech students who are in their like early 20s,
Yeah.
late 19s, right?
Yeah.
I mean, you are supposed to quarantine the old people, not
Yeah.
us, right?
Yes. Good question, right? Yeah. Yeah, because
Yeah,
because and it's a protection, right? You just put a barrier for
yeah,
that environment. And what happened, right, was by having people isolate so much, then they were more in closed environments and really kind of came little incubator dishes in different ways and didn't fight the virus as well as if they were out in the environment, in the air, and all the different things involved with just activity.
yeah. I just feel like a lot of chaos during those years.
Hmm.
And, I just think although it has passed, but like still I see a lot of problem in our government, in our policy. And I see the influence of the Chinese government because never before the US government took this route.
Yeah.
Never before, right? I mean, I just feel like it's the influence of Chinese government because this is the model of the
Hmm.
Chinese government. The Chinese government said, "Oh, you should do so," and then every other country follow,
Hmm.
and then we all got our lesson, right? I
Yeah.
mean, I just feel Americans lost trust towards science. If
Yeah.
scientists cannot speak the truth, they just lost trust towards science, and that also caused other extreme like actions. Like people
Yeah.
say, "Oh, COVID virus never existed," and then like it's just terrible, right? Just think about it,
It's
and
all
also like
lie.
the people
I
all
don't know.
lies,
It's the
and then
U.S.
people,
U.S. government. It's Israel. They did it. Whatever. Just all kind of. It was
yeah.
space aliens,
I
probably.
mean,
I don't know.
no,
Who
I mean,
knows?
it just create a lot of chaos because once you lose the trust towards the government, you lose the trust towards scientists. I mean, it caused a lot of problem
Well,
in the
well, and in
community.
America, just you think about it. I mean, there's loss of trust in science, loss of trust in the medical field, loss of trust
Yeah,
in media, loss of trust,
yeah,
education. boy, we learned some things
Yeah.
about education in America, right? And I
Yeah.
think uh, really this is a key time, a wake-up call around the
Yeah.
world to, hey guys, let's look at facts. Let's learn the truth. There's a lot of stuff we probably need to tune out that's being
Yeah.
influenced, and not only, the Chinese communist influence, but other ones as well. There's so many, and you can see the negative influences, right? Because it brings division, it lies, it hides things, it promotes death and just all kinds of craziness. But we need to wake up, I guess is what I'm saying,
Yeah.
right?
So this is my hope, like Dennis, at least that we ourselves as individuals
Yeah,
take our little effort to speak
yeah,
in the truth. I hope I can, add a little bit more truth to the
right.
community by sharing my knowledge
Yeah,
today. And
yeah,
thank you very much for giving me the opportunity.
yeah. It's so great to be able to learn each other's stories because that's so valuable, right? And if we don't know our stories, then we're not going to know who we are. And then as we learn who we are, we all can have a voice and we can choose our voice, right? You choose to speak for the voiceless. You don't have to. You choose to. You've chosen to be a voice for others. And we have that option in our lives. We can be a voice for truth. We can be a voice for others. And we should, starting in our homes, in our families, in our communities, in our neighborhoods. America's amazing, right? We have opportunities to vote and have help have relationships with individuals that can represent us in areas of politics and stuff like that. And we really need to get back to that ground level and know truth and walk in it.
Thank you very much for
Thank you,
having this
Win.
opportunity.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. All right. I am signing out and thank everybody for joining. We will share more again, I know, because it's a wonderful journey and I'm enjoying every step. And oh, I think, do I have it? Oh, I'll play a song on the way out. So, Lynn Morris, I think I mentioned to you this off air, was helping to do a fundraiser for a group here in town that helps in a kind of a more depressed neighborhood, in helping individuals, first time home buyers, education, community garden, all that. So I made a song for them. So I am going to sign out with that song. Here we go. Got to put the audio on.
Sometimes the world gets heavy and the cares start moving in. We're looking at the shadows where the difficulties begin. The finances are shaking and the body is feeling warm, but there's a reminder waiting for the spirit to be reborn. Preacher Dennis Eversen says to look beyond the sight, to the power that we carry, to the glory of the light. Do you know who you are in the Savior's eyes? Beyond the earthly parents and the world's disguise, you're the salt of the earth, the flavor and the state, the light of the world that chases night away. A child of the Father, born of Spirit, born of grace, finding intimacy in the shelter of His faith. Let the nutrients flow through. There's a harvest of the Spirit and a work for us to do. Not a burden, not a requirement to earn a holy prize, but a joy to give back something that was bought before our eyes. No longer called a servant, now He calls us friends instead. With an inheritance of glory, where the golden streets are spread. tongues, and it isn't stone and lime. Yes, it is. It's a living, breathing manifest for such a darksome time. The author of the story lives inside to lead the way, to remind us of the word and every promise he will say. Yeah. So let the living water bubble up and overflow through the people of the kingdom is the only way he'll show. Do you know who you are in the Savior's eyes? Beyond the earthly parents and the world's disguise. Yeah. Do you know who you are in the Savior's eyes? Beyond the earthly parents and the world's disguise. You're the salt of the earth, the flavor and the stain, the light of the world that chases night away. A child of the Father, born of Spirit, born of grace, finding intimacy in the shelter of his face. So bow the knee in freedom while you still have breath to sing. Be the fruit, be the leaven, be the honor to the King. You are the fullness of the one who fills it all, standing steady, standing ready, answering